Hi everyone, I'm Hannah and welcome back to the Online Art Club. This week we'll revisit some more of the basic foundations of art, the elements of shape and form. I know they sound like really simple things, but there's actually a lot to learn here and a lot to explore. Shape and form can make up all kinds of works of art, so we'll explore some fun images from the Palmer's collection and see the diversity of shape and form within multiple works. Shape and form are related, but they are different things. The definition of shape is a flat area surrounded by edges or an outline. Shapes are always two-dimensional, meaning they appear to be flat, like they're lying on a paper with no depth to them. Notice here how these works are made up entirely of shapes that seem to be lying flat, with no shadows or dimension. There are different kinds of shapes, called geometric shapes and organic shapes. Geometric shapes include squares, circles, triangles, polygons, all the shapes based on mathematics. In this screen print by artist Ilya Bolotowski, we see a few different geometric shapes. This work is made up entirely of squares and rectangles. Organic shapes are different, often made by curved lines and shapes typically found in nature, like leaves, trees, amoebas, and flower petals. They don't have to follow any mathematical or technical rules. This particular work is full of organic shapes that take up different kinds of spaces across the whole paper. The mixture of curved and linear edges with the multiple different sizes and colors creates a captivating scene. Shapes have the ability to give a work of art so much character. A good way to think about form is as an extension of shape. Form can appear in artworks in many different ways. A form is a three-dimensional or three-dimensional appearing version of a shape, meaning they are not flat, but rather they do have depth. Forms can be physically three-dimensional, like an object or a sculpture, or they can be two-dimensional but have visual manipulations that make them look like they're 3D. For example, lines, shading, highlighting, and white space can make simple shapes appear to have depth and shadows. These shapes are transformed into forms using these special artistic techniques, making them look 3D when they are actually flat. In this painting, the circles are shaded in a way that makes them appear to pop up from the paper to look like apples, giving them depth and appearing to be 3D, which makes them forms. The addition of three-dimensionality can turn both organic and geometric shapes into forms. In this work, the geometric shapes are given shadows and drawn in a certain perspective that gives the appearance of a 3D room. Here, some organic and geometric shapes are shaded, colored, and highlighted in ways that make the figures look abstract as well as three-dimensional. The way the shapes are filled in make the figures in the picture look like they're built together by separated forms. There are many ways to add depth and shape to create forms. For our project, we will be working with the ideas of shape and form to create our own abstract work of art. Since form and shape are such broad ideas, our project is open for lots of creativity and interpretation. It's very easy to use shape and form to create abstract art. As we saw in our examples, sometimes shape can be the entire composition of a work, but other times they can come into play to support another main element. For our project, we'll use shapes and forms as the main element of the artwork. Decide whether you want to work with geometric or organic shapes, or both, and create a composition that fills your page. If you want, you can expand your shapes into a 3D work and create a sculpture or a structure using forms. As you prepare, let's see how the rest of the team decided to work with shapes and forms. This was my first time using digital media to create a project, so it took me a while to envision and decide exactly what I wanted the project to end up looking like. I took a picture of my shoes, laid them as the background, and started finding shapes within the image. I selected a paintbrush and outlined shapes that I saw making up the whole picture of the shoes on a different layer. It ended up being a combination of both geometric and organic shapes. Once I had shapes outlining and filling up each shoe, I started adding color one by one to each section I had outlined. I did this to try giving the image a more abstracted and mosaic look. Once my layer of color was full, I applied a blur to the whole image so that the colors of the shoes would somewhat blend together under the outlines. It didn't end up looking as abstracted as I wanted, but it was still fun to try digital drawing because it's something I hope I can get good at in the future. Use this project as an excuse to try something new.
Today I am going to draw an abstract painting inspired by Jean de Buffet. For this prompt, you will need only paper and markers. Let's start with drawing organic shapes using a black marker. Some artists plan their work and create abstract paintings by intended design though. Some artists do their works by their instinct. Today, I decided to follow my intuition. After my drawing, I will color these organic shapes. I'd like to use blue and purple colors to express my today's feeling. We can also use various patterns to fill in the shapes. I will use stripes, checks, and dots. You can choose whatever you like, but please keep in mind that you need to effectively express shapes and forms. After filling them in, I will use a black marker again to draw bolder outlines and create forms. It will help us to add some depth and shadows. I think I am all done. I love these shapes and forms. In some angles, the drawing seems like various 3D patches. I hope you can also create your unique shapes and forms.
I was really excited about the prompt this week because I love using shapes and forms in my artistic practice. Instead of working with shapes on a single piece of paper, I decided that I wanted to use layering to create interesting and unique shapes. I started off by painting 6 pages in my sketchbook different colors. If you choose to do something like this, you could also use construction paper or create as many layers as you like. I wanted to cut shapes on each page so that the color underneath would show through. I used an X-Acto knife, and if you use this tool, make sure to be careful and have parent supervision. You could also use scissors to cut into the page and then tape the back. On the first page, I cut large shapes. Since it is the top layer, I wanted to leave the most space for the layers underneath to show through. I put a piece of cardboard down when I was cutting the shapes so that the page underneath wouldn't get cut into as well. I essentially just repeated this process on each layer. I ended up tracing my shapes so that I would know what was showing through and would cut the next layer accordingly. The shapes got smaller as I went through the layers. I really love how this turned out, and I was happy with the colors I chose. When you flip through, it looks different on each page. I thought this was a unique way to create new shapes that you might not think of if you were drawing on a single piece of paper.
Hello everyone, it's Chelsea. Shape is such a broad and exciting prompt for this week. There are endless possibilities, but I suppose it's no surprise that I decided to use paper collage as my medium. I love cutting out different shapes from paper and arranging them on the page. Collage is a perfect medium for this week because you can move your shapes around the paper and try out different compositions. For this prompt, I decided to give myself a bit of a challenge. I picked out a bunch of different colorful papers and started cutting out random shapes. I didn't think too much about what I was cutting. I just made sure to try a lot of colors and a variety of shapes, like squares, circles, ovals, rectangles, and triangles. My challenge is to use every single shape I cut in my final composition. After I got all of my big and little shapes cut out, I started by simply placing shapes on my background paper and moving them and layering them until I liked how they looked. This is a process of trial and error. Don't be afraid to try unusual things. You might be surprised by what works and what doesn't. Artists learn from experimentation, so just play and see what happens. This would also be really fun to try with patterned or textured paper, even old magazines, books, or newspaper pages. All right, I've almost found a home for all of my shapes, just a couple more to place. Those light purple shapes were the trickiest to find, but I think I found a good spot on the opposite corners of the picture. After I had everything placed, I glued it down. With an abstract composition like this, it's important to think about balance, one of the central principles of design. I created balance by making sure the shapes were spaced across the page. I didn't want to have a bunch of big, heavy shapes on one area and small shapes on the other. Instead, I made sure to put big and small shapes together across from each other, so the visual weight is distributed across the page in a pleasing way. This was a fun prompt to try for shapes. It often helps to give yourself parameters to follow, like using every shape you cut out. It helps to challenge your artistic mind and think differently than it normally does. I hope you enjoyed watching me give it a try.
Thank you so much for tuning in and for creating some abstract art with us. Make sure to show us what you made by posting a photo of your work on Instagram or Facebook and use the hashtag #PalmerOnlineArtClub. Can't wait to see what you've made.